from the low desert in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, and now in his brand spanking new digs in beautiful Uzhgorod in Transcarpathia in Ukraine. This is Politics and the Past with Robert Ferguson, and my guest today, back for part two, is Dr. Yaroslav Kovalchuk, who is coming to us from metropolitan Uzhgorod, not downtown Uzhgorod, in Transcarpathia, which is western Ukraine. Yaroslav, thank you very much for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me again.
Well, we had a really
if you invited me again, I guess that the last time wasn't that bad.
It was good. We had a great response from people, so they really appreciated the episode. And for those of you who are just tuning into this one, I highly recommend you go back and listen to that one. Dr. Kovalchuk gives us a really good summary and analysis of Ukrainian politics since independence in 1991, really between independence and Zelensky's election in 2019. And so this time we were hoping to pick up from that and really talk about what politics is like in a war zone. How does politics operate when the country is being invaded? So, Yaroslav, without going too far back into our previous discussion, are you able to introduce Volodymyr Zelenskyy a little bit and talk about his victory in the presidential election in 2019?
Yeah, Zelenskyy became famous, I think, in the late 90s, early 2000s as a comedian. Once again, I think I will roll back the narrative to the Soviet times. Just to give a good background from what kind of showbiz Zelenskyy is coming. During Soviet time, there was such thing as the club for funny and smart, something like that's good literal translation. The idea was that different, usually students, but not necessarily students, teams, they participate in a competition like who are better comedians. But unlike, I don't know, some kind of stand-up that you're familiar in the US, when one person standing on the stage and, I don't know, delivering jokes or whatever, this was, as in a good Soviet fashion, was more a collective endeavor. And teams had to compete with each other who are better in different ways at making jokes. So that thing was established in the Soviet Union, I think in the 1970s or 1960s even. And with few pauses, it kind of continued till the post-Soviet period, and it was kind of common thing for the whole post-Soviet space. So there was this kind of, post-Soviet league of this different competitions of this comedian teams, I could say. So Zelenskyy's career started in the place like this. So it was televised, people watched it in different corners of the post-Soviet space. And so Zelenskyy actually became famous not only as a Ukrainian comedian, but also as a post-Soviet comedian, because everybody watched him. I mean, everybody who liked this kind of comedy watched him in Russia too, and the Caucasus, in Central Asia. So that's kind of the level of popularity of Zelenskyy. And his team performed pretty well. His team was coming from his hometown, Kryvyi Rih, which is central southern Ukraine, the Dnipro region. It's actually not that far away from the front line today. And Zelenskyy became popular. Like, his team performed well. I don't think they won something serious, but they were definitely in the finals. And then, you can have a certain run in this kind of competition, and then you do something with your career. Usually people did some shows on TV, and he became like a comedian on Ukrainian TV. So he continued his, we could say, like post-Soviet career further in Ukraine and in 2000s. And his show called like the Evening District, something like that, because his team was called 95th District, which is called the district in Kryvyi Rih, and then it's kind of changed 95th into the Evening District or City District, you can call it. I don't know how to translate exactly in English, but the idea was that he established his show on Ukrainian TV, and his show actually became quite popular as a political satire in 2000s. It continued in 2010s, and except this kind of comedy show, they started making films. He also was kind of like an actor in different comedy films, not only Ukrainian but also Russian. It was at that time till 2014. You could say that was a common market of that, and Zelenskyy was playing both like nationally in Ukraine and also in Russia, so that's kind of making different common commercial entertainment products on TV, like cinema sets, films, different kind of stuff. So he was,
And he voiced Paddington Bear in
yes, in
Ukraine.
Ukrainian dubbing.
Yeah, in the Ukrainian dubbing. So, he was very prolific.
Yes, and today you can easily find, in Ukrainian segment of internet, you can find variety of memes because he was in any kind of slapstick comedy you can imagine. And the person being a president today, you can easily find some stupid video with Zelenskyy. I don't know, playing like one of the most infamous are him playing a Napoleon in Russian film, like of Napoleon invasion of Russia in 1812, which kind of it's a bit different today.
Certainly. No, I mean, I could imagine, especially you got some, really comedic actor who's done a lot of roles, especially doing slapstick. For an American audience, I think I can imagine like what happened if I mean, he was Canadian, but what happened if Leslie Nielsen became president, or what happened if Leslie Nielsen became prime minister? He'd be trying to be serious, but in your head, you'd be thinking of the Naked Gun movies.
Yes, something like that. And in 2014, if we're moving closer to politics, he actually supported Maidan. I think, I don't know the details exactly, but I think he supported some of the either voluntary battalions or provide some humanitarian aid to people who suffered from starting war in Donbass. So he was involved in politics. Not involved in politics, but he presented his political position openly that moment. And in 2019, when the new presidential elections were coming, and it was clear that previous President Poroshenko had quite low rating in the polls because of the corruption scandals and the promises that he hadn't delivered, that was actually an opportunity for somebody new to come. And I remember I was kind of surprised when polls sometimes do that. They throw like random candidate like before the election, so you see who are getting some kind of popularity. And I remember, I think less than a year before that, that Zelenskyy started appearing in the surveys, and he started demonstrating quite significant popularity, which was growing and growing because he was that popular.
Sure.
Persona.
Now, I've got a question. Do you think people, this is again before the war, before he became president, were able to separate Zelenskyy the person from Zelenskyy the character the characters he played on TV?
That's a good question, because clearly I forgot to mention, as I said, that they made different kind of entertainment product. Before the election, there was several seasons of TV show called The Servant of the People, where Zelenskyy played a school teacher who became a president. Nobody expected that he people would vote for him, and he was some kind of technical candidate in the TV show. You can watch it, I think. I think it was on Netflix. I'm not sure if it still is.
Yeah, it was on English. It was on American Netflix not that long ago. I don't know if it still is.
I mean, I remember it was when Zelenskyy was elected. It was American Netflix. I don't know about now. There was, I think, 3 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, the first season he becomes a president, and then, different kind of slapstick, not always, but, political satire, slapstick comedy, like the usual stuff. And that kind of alluded to the sentiment that, as school teacher can become a president, and just being an honest person, he can make a difference despite all the difficulties. So that was the message. And I think that's something that created this image for Zelenskyy as an honest person and possible president. Like, I'm a simple person. So I just want to fight corruption. I don't want to take bribes. And I want to, make direct, clear-cut decisions, not being this, like, some people say experienced, but still crooked politician, like Poroshenko was. At least that was his image. So
what was his character's name on Servant of the People?
I don't remember. To be honest, I only watched the first episode. I'm not a big fan of Zelenskyy comedy. So I only know it from, like, how people talked about the TV show. I liked it when I was a kid, but when I grew up,
Zelensky's comedy just didn't do it for you.
No, although I was, that moment I was quite supportive of him as the president that counterbalanced Poroshenko. Didn't like his politics, but talking about my politics. But I wasn't a big fan of Zelenskyy as a comedian, to be honest.
Sure,
because
so
he was everywhere.
You personally had separated Zelenskyy the comedian from Zelenskyy the public figure. But yeah. I was just curious. And I mean, in an election, if you're Zelenskyy and it's 2019, it doesn't hurt you to lean into who your character on the show was a little bit, right? This pretty popular character in Ukraine, right? Why should you convince people that you're all that different from your character if the character's popular? And that's what has brought you to this point, right?
Yes, I think that's played significant role and definitely helped to boost his popularity, that image that, many people could sympathize with what TV show was presenting. And it's not only popularity, Zelenskyy, who played different, as I say, he played Napoleon, ridiculous character in a Russian film. Different kind of slapstick comedy that he did that many people actually found offensive, and there was actually, very minor, but even protests. I remember once or twice, like a few people were coming to the office of the TV channel where his company was working. So yes, but that's the thing. I think that TV show really helped just to amplify already established popularity in Ukraine.
Sure. All right. So he wins against Poroshenko in 2019 on an anti-corruption, and he's the peace candidate, right?
Yes.
Poroshenko is Poroshenko's the more hyper nationalist candidate. Poroshenko, the chocolate king. The more hyper nationalist candidate, and Zelenskyy, who kind of comes from this border, or this region that's sort of on the border of eastern Ukraine, is the more apparently sober peace candidate with Russia.
He appeals to the sentiment that Poroshenko is playing the nationalist card and refuses to have meaningful negotiations with Russia. I kind of want to think differently. So that was I think they only met once. So Zelenskyy actually met Putin in 2019. They met personally.
Zelenskyy met Putin in 2019?
Yeah, in the fall of 2019, I think in Paris or in Normandy. I remember there was this kind of Normandy format, it was called, something like that, when Germany and France, and I think European Union, or not the European Union, but also the United States, are kind of trying to mediate the process. It wasn't like Minsk, where they signed the agreement in 2014 and 15, but it was kind of how we implement already signed document. And that's, when I think it was started with Poroshenko. It wasn't like something new that Zelensky invented, but he kind of came back to already established format that he thought he could do different.
Sure. So, I mean, but he comes to power with this general sentiment among the Ukrainian people that we don't need to we don't need to provoke Putin anymore, like Poroshenko's been doing. Sort of let's retcon, let's search for common ground, and then, but between 2019 and 2022, obviously that strategy doesn't work.
No, there are different, I would say, factors that played in. Domestically, if we're talking about Ukraine, was, although not strongly present in the parliament or in power in general, definitely very vocal and present in civil society opposition to sort of so-called, it was called at that moment Steinmeier formal, because the name of German president who kind of supported the sequence of how things should be implementing in the Minsk Accords. So that first comes the elections, and then comes the control of the border. So
Right.
That's kind of
right, and we went over that in detail in the last episode. So
Yeah,
if people, again, if people, they should go back and listen to that, because we talked about that for 15 or 20 minutes in the last episode, and which was really good. But so Zelensky, what's Zelensky's popularity in Ukraine like before the invasion?
it had its ups and downs. 2018, one step after another. He wins the election, and then there are supposed to be parliamentary elections. And his party winning, the party that was established in the matter of a few months, it was, I think, registered not long before the presidential elections. And they just hectically were looking for people just to have the list.
Yeah, you wanted to have you needed to have warm bodies on the list. Yeah. Probably the vetting wasn't the vetting probably was not great.
I mean, everybody wanted to join the new party that was gaining popularity under Zelensky's name. So clearly you end up with all kinds of people in your party. That's something that hits his popularity now, but we'll go to it further down our conversation. But yeah, that's the thing. The party is formed hectically and very quickly, and it gets clear majority inside the parliament, so they don't need any kind of coalition to form the government. The situation is unusual for Ukraine, because even in the high time of Yanukovych, they still needed a minor partner like Communist Party, because their numbers weren't enough. Actually, Zelensky's result in presidential elections also kind of almost unparalleled, around 75% of support. So yeah, I think that's the highest support that the Ukrainian president received independence. I mean, that's like after the conference.
That's almost Vladimir Putin numbers.
Yeah, but that's genuine numbers. There were like international observers that can, tell you that the elections were fair. And I mean, Zelensky was running as an opposition candidate, so that's clear that he had kind of serious support, and he could do many things that other presidents couldn't before him. And he tried to deliver that with corruption, fighting corruption, stuff like that. I mean, it actually didn't work that well, because when you form your team that hectically and quickly, you end up in the endless cycle of scandals. And that's what started haunting Zelensky, I think, since 2019, So yeah, the first months, and he had to change. Like he formed the first government, and the first prime minister already was out of office in early 2020, right before COVID, I think, a month or less before COVID, and the prime minister whom we had before recently, actually, when this different changes started in the government, Denis Shmyhal, he actually had to deal with COVID right away. But yeah, so that's the thing that the start was pretty hectic when you formed your team like that, and he couldn't do many things. And then COVID started, though all the plan that he wanted didn't work that well. But I could say the first years of that, some of the achievements were making all of the state services digital. So I think that was one of the prior achievements. Yeah, that's like you have an app where you have your passport, all the documents you need. You can, they slowly, even during the wartime after 2022, they implemented different things that you can do digitally. That's kind of handy. You don't have to go to different offices
Yeah.
and stay in the line for the whole day to receive that piece of paper, which you have to go to a different office. So it's all
Yeah, I
can be
mean,
done digitally.
I think we saw in like, places like the Baltics where going with digital government services in a lot of ways helped sort of gut out some of the Soviet, the lingering sort of Soviet bureaucratic like structure, right? It was sort of a way,
Yeah,
hey, we can kind of rebuild this from the ground up, which will allow us to streamline things and allow us to just sort of get rid of some of that lingering Soviet, chaff.
yeah, that's something I think, especially during the COVID time, that was handy that you could have your COVID certificate that you had a shot, or that you can go to a bar, you can just present it like that. So I mean, many people felt that they made their life more comfortable, and that was something tangible to
Hmm.
it's all in your phone.
Interesting. So people really
Uh,
so I mean, that was a major positive for Zelenskyy then.
yeah, that was a major positive, and actually, the guy who implemented it, Fedorov, he is in good relation with Elon Musk. So that
Mm.
he actually the person who kind of smoothed things recently that Musk helped to shut down Russian Starlinks. So that's because he was when the invasion in 2022 started, and he is like coming from civil service, civil society sector, and he is very much in different tech things. So Fedorov is kind of one of the good, ministers in Zelensky government that had this, positive image because he had to implement this reform, which was significant plus on Zelensky's side. And now recently he became the Minister of Defense. So he's trying to implement different tech innovations in the army. So that's kind of his task now. But that guy, I think, almost in unique position, this guy, Fedorov, because he with Zelensky right from the start, from 2019. Not many people are with Zelensky from that time. Many of them left, new came outside. But that's interesting that this guy who
He's been
implemented,
Yeah, he's been with Zelensky since 2019, and he's viewed as being very competent
yeah,
and
and
not
now
corrupt.
he's yeah, no corruption scandal around him, and the ministry was established for him, the Minister of Digital Transformation. So you makes it was called the state in your smartphone. That was kind of the slogan of the reform. So
Interesting.
that was one big thing that helped boost Zelensky kind of carry on some popularity. The second one was building infrastructure objects. So many roads were built during the COVID time. But that was kind of double-edged sword for Zelensky. Something that people also was tangible, people appreciated because people usually complain in Ukraine about the quality of roads. And because it happened during the COVID time, people, on the other hand, complained about it because, oh, you're spending money on the roads, but not on healthcare. So that was a mixed bag. But I think in the end was also kind of something tangible and what people liked.
He could point
But
to something. He could say, "Hey, listen, I bring you roads. I bring you the state in your smartphone. You know, it's not perfect. Things are, things were not going to change overnight, but we can point to this very positive progress on some fronts, at least."
yeah, but the problem with Zelensky was that corruption scandals continued and there was no resolution to the conflict in the Donbass. So that's kind of, he delivered something definitely new, unlike Poroshenko, but that wasn't enough. So his popularity went down significantly before the invasion of 2022. So
what's your sense on, had there been a regularly scheduled election and the war had not happened? Obviously, like, major hypotheticals here. But had he had sort of the normal course of a Ukrainian presidential term, do you think he would have been easily reelected, or do you think he would have had really difficult? He would have struggled much like Poroshenko did in 2019.
I think he would be in a better position than Poroshenko, but that wouldn't be that easy as it was for him with Poroshenko. So I
Fair
think
enough.
it depends on the opponents that he faces. If it's only old politicians, he could easily win. That. But if some kind of new politician, that's actually some of the new politicians were fragmenting from his party. And there was even false start for one of the guys who was initially the Speaker of the Parliament, and then he deposed because he started his own political campaign, but that was too early, and then the invasion happened, so no kind of election for him. The guy, his name is Yaroslav Kovalchuk, but yeah, he would have a chance against him. Maybe some other guy. So a new guy could actually, I think he or she could have a chance against Zelensky. But that, as I'm saying, there were pluses and minuses.
Sure.
And what
Sure.
Zelensky track record.
So in February 2022, Zelensky may have been, more popular than many presidents had been at that point in his term, but hardly universally popular, had lost a lot of support. When was the last parliamentary election, Yaroslav?
2019. It was right after
the last
the
parliamentary election was 2019.
That was Zelensky's idea. So we kind of restart the politics in Ukraine. So I'm a new kind of politician, a new kind of president, and I need a new kind of parliament. So that's he received that majority in the parliament, and then he could implement, because he needed a government. In Ukraine is a mixed republic, so it requires both parliament and president to agree to form the government. So he needed a parliament that would work with him. And that's actually Zelensky's problem, that he doesn't like procedures. He doesn't like to follow, as it's written in the law, or in the instructions, how things are done. And he needed obedient parliament. And when the parliament started to disobey, and that's something that started a year before the Russian invasion, there is an institution called Security Council in Ukraine. It's it's kind of headed by the president, and it includes different ministers or officials who are head of the security service, minister of defense, guys like that. Some kind of use of force is in their responsibility, put it that way. And that, they kind of discuss the security. That's why it's called Security Council. So he started through that institution sort of issuing sanctions. You think about sanctions as a tool in international politics, and Russia was sanctioned or North Korea was sanctioned, or things like that. But Zelensky used it in internal politics. He used it against people who were accused of being smugglers. I just remembered it vividly because it's relevant for my home region, and some guys who were kind of smugglers were under investigation, and that, it's a long procedure. that the courts will try to figure out if they did something wrong or not. Gathering of evidence, it drags for years, and that's something that people complained. That you can start a like corruption case, and then it just drags on and leads nowhere. That's something that during the Poroshenko time, it was like one of the EU requirements was to establish this anti-corruption institutions, which important actually moment for when we discuss further like wartime politics. This institutions that were independent from Ukrainian politics. So the idea was that these institutions had prerogatives to investigate and then to start and lead the case in the court, and somebody accused of high-level corruption. And those institutions were formed outside of Ukraine. So this kind of was board of international experts who selected those investigators and then attorneys who led the cases. So that was kind of the idea that people from they could be, usually these were people from Ukraine, but they were pre-selected by outsiders, like this international experts. So that was the idea. But that actually didn't give many results because many cases were started, but not many led to, what people like to see, that somebody is in jail. I don't know if you watched how it's done in China. It's very dramatic, those corruption trials, and people are present, people crying. There was nothing like that in Ukraine. It was boring legal stuff, gathering evidence, and very long, and people actually felt that it didn't work. So Zelenskyy tried to do it through this mechanism of sanctions to those people who were accused of corruption. But another important moment that he used this mechanism of internal sanctions, that people, their businesses could be like nationalized or be under arrest, something like that. So that's kind of dubious legal and not very legitimate pieces of legislature, but decrees produced by the Security Council.
It's almost like so if they were coming from Parliament, it's almost like bills of attainder.
Yeah.
And the Security Council kind of becomes a star chamber for making these decisions.
Yeah, that's something that he also weaponized, not against those people who are some kind of involved in corruption, but those who are perceived as supposed, like clearly Russian agents, that he starts sanctioning it. And actually, when he sanctioned the godfather of Putin's kids, Viktor Medvedchuk, who was head of one of the pro-Russian opposition parties in Ukraine, and then the investigation started against him. So that's the first time we heard news in 2021 when Russia started gathering troops on the Ukrainian borders. That's kind of, all these things connected in a way.
Yeah, no, sure. In 2021 is when Zelenskyy targets Medvedchuk, right?
Yeah.
With one of these sanctions packages that comes out of the Security Council.
Yeah, that was part of the story. Then part of that was investigation. So it was also proper, like not this anti-corruption institution, but because he was investigated as Russian agent. Because by that time, I think Zelenskyy realized that negotiations with Russia did not go anywhere. I think we started that conversation and I flipped into Ukrainian politics. But yeah, there was this opposition against this kind of sequence of implementation. But also Russia was rather thinking that we can, some kind of play Zelenskyy in this game of negotiations, but he didn't want to be played. So that Russia would receive their agents inside Ukraine. He was aware of the risk and quickly learned it. And actually there was achievements actually on the negotiations with Russia, because there was big POWs, or I don't know, you could call it POW because it's basically Ukrainians who were repressed inside Russia because they went to trial and then ended up in jail, like activists in Crimea, pro-Ukrainian activists. and they were exchanged, and Zelensky presented as, big first step that, we're getting our people out of Russia, so we have some kind of dialogue. And Russians were also willing to do that as, gesture of goodwill that we can continue our dialogue, but their demands didn't change. So we want controlled regions inside countries that can veto any significant policy, especially foreign policy. So that didn't change.
They still wanted control over Ukrainian foreign policy.
Yeah, they could do it through region or through their political parties that work with Kremlin. In 2021, there were two parties like that. One almost got into parliament but didn't get there, and Medvedchuk's party, they're actually on the rise. That could actually give Putin an impression that he could enjoy some support inside Ukraine. I think it was around 20% that Medvedchuk's party received.
Did Medvedchuk's party have any seats in parliament?
Yeah, they did. But I think what gave that impression that it was regional elections. I think it was in 2020 or 2021. I don't remember exactly, but that was a year after or two. I think 2020. It was 2020 was a regional election. But the Chuk's party demonstrated good results in eastern and southern regions. So that could give the impression.
I imagine that, Medvedchuk's party, though certainly pro-Russian in its rhetoric, would not have been as pro-Russia as Putin might have thought they were being with their rhetoric. It could have been easy to imagine how, okay, they're getting 20% support, but that doesn't mean that's 20% support for Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, that was rather for, we will definitely deliver a peace. We know how to talk with Putin, with Russia. Right. So that was their message.
Right. Whereas Putin could have interpreted that as being, these guys like me.
Yes. But that's the thing, that before 2014, actually, Putin was the most popular politician, one of the most popular politicians in Ukraine. Common for post-Soviet countries, when you ask whom you consider, good politician, and then you have a list of your domestic politicians, and Putin, and Putin usually, performed better in the surveys, and Lukashenko actually. This kind of two authoritarian guys who have image that they can definitely can make things right in their country. That's the image.
We get things done
from Russian.
Yeah. We get things done.
And we in our country, we have this kind of messy politics, and everybody's corrupted, and Putin. But after 2014, it changed for Putin, and after 2022, it changed for Lukashenko. And I think after 2020, when there was pretty bloody suppression of protests, many people in Ukraine actually were disillusioned about Lukashenko.
All right. So the sanctions issued by the Security Council against Medvedchuk, who's a political opponent, as well as Putin's, the godfather of Putin's kids, and also very clearly a pro-Russian agent in the country, which makes him a very difficult figure, right? And so the Security Council and Parliament put sanctions against him, and this is what leads to the mobilization in 2021, and then the full-scale invasion in 2022 in your mind, right?
I should, stress it. That's my interpretation of them, because there are different ideas what led to the invasion, and I agree that there are different factors that played it. And actually, after the sanctions, there was proper investigation started, and actually, Medvedchuk was, I think, home arrest. So when investigation was going on and the case was in court.
Sure.
And,
but your in the last episode you said your interpretation was that was the catalyst. There was lots of factors, but that was the catalyst.
Yeah, I think so. That, uh, for example, people like to say that how the United States pulled out from Afghanistan demonstrated to Russia that, oh, their puppets are actually they can easily crumble. So we can try to do it in Ukraine because they see Ukraine as some kind of Western puppet. Oh,
Okay, well,
so
let's get, yeah,
that's one interpretation. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, no, and I think it all feeds. I mean, it's again, it's
Or another one that Putin just went crazy in the quarantine and decided, his close circle told him that we can actually solve the whole Donbass thing and actually Ukrainian problem just by invading. So that's another interpretation.
he wasn't the only
That
one
this
that he
is,
might. You know what? Lots of people went crazy in quarantine. Putin wouldn't have been the only one. Um, so, all right. So the invasion occurs, and Zelensky very famously makes a statement. I don't need a ride. I need ammunition, or I need bullets, whatever it was.
I think that's a fake quote. Somebody invented it. I think that's basically what his position, but it sounded. I think I read somebody's article that said like he didn't say that, but the quote was too good not to say it.
He wouldn't. He wouldn't tell you he didn't say it if he you know. But okay, yeah, it doesn't matter because that's the sentiment, right?
That's a
And
good quote actually that
it
describes it.
is. It is a good quote. And but anyway, so Zelensky, the country rallies to Zelensky very fast after the invasion. And from outside, and again, we could talk about the war, but I'm going to try to avoid talking about the war here to focus on Zelensky and his political position. Um, it seemed to me that he was relatively popular. He maintained that very high degree of support for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
that's, you mean after the start of the
After
invasion
the
or
invasion.
before?
Yeah, after
Yeah,
the
yeah,
invasion.
yeah.
Yeah, after the invasion. And so what was it? I the fact that he was willing to stay and fight and risk his own life, unlike, let's say, the leader in Afghanistan, 8 months earlier, who fled on the first plane he could get. Um, what what was it that caused people to rally to Zelensky?
I would say that was in general people slowly, even before the invasion. I think Ukraine, I saw the mood that people were kind of prepare, like different people. Some people were preparing for the defense. They were entering this self-defense units that later helped to in the first year to mobilize people quite efficiently and quickly. Others were like, you know, didn't believe it could happen. So that was clear shock when it did. And when that happened, when even if you are skeptical about Zelensky, but you real and our leader stayed in the capital. It's basically it wasn't under the siege. People could still get to Kiev,
Yeah,
but
it hadn't been encircled, but it was under attack.
yeah, yeah, and he stayed there, and as it seemed in the first days that he was one of the main target of the invasion, so he was supposed to be either killed or captured. That was, I think, clear from day 1 or 2. So, and he decided to, I don't know, take a fight. That's something that people really appreciated that moment, and something that pops up today, that what he did before the invasion, he was trying to calm people down, saying nothing gonna happen. It's all just Russia posturing, and we will negotiate everything. Do not worry. Though something that people now criticize Zelensky for, at that moment was forgotten because he took that stance by staying in the capital, basically presenting it as I'm taking a fight. So that's
Sure. And
gave him a good start.
right. And the fact is that the Ukrainian armed forces acquitted themselves very, very well, or unexpectedly well, at least. And so that
That's
only that only rebounds to the credibility of Zelenskyy.
Here is the tricky part now, because for today, because that part is attributed not to Zelenskyy, even at that moment. At that moment, the chief of staff Zaluzhny, who was also became kind of like figure comparable to Zelenskyy already in February 2022. Maybe not that much for, I don't know, outsiders in the West, for whom Zelenskyy, guy who decided to fight back, Zaluzhny's popularity was equally high as Zelenskyy. Maybe a bit less, maybe by a few percent, or
Yeah, but I mean, I
but
expect after the counteroffensive in Kharkiv, which Zaluzhny was, you know, sort of was the face of in many ways, if not the architect of it, was the face of it. I mean, I expect his popularity eclipsed Zelenskyy after that.
they were like equals, I would say.
Yeah, okay.
But it started in February 2022. I remember actually when I was in Kiev in May 2022, you could see many billboards with quotes by Zaluzhny. I was surprised. Nobody, like, no quotes and images of Zelenskyy. Actually, during the wartime, I cannot recall if there were any kind of public image of, like, poster or something like that. There was like that with Zaluzhny in the first year, I remember. And usually now, recruitment, some of the, veterans or people who passed away. So that's kind of image. But yeah, it's interesting. I remember that Zaluzhny's popularity was rising already at that moment, and they were like two equally popular people, and I think structurally their conflict was already from the get-go, because all of the successes of the Ukrainian army in the first year were attributed to Zaluzhny, the defense of Kiev, the successful counteroffensive in Kharkiv, freeing Kherson in the south. All those things definitely helped Zelenskyy too, but first recipient of, who is responsible for our success was Zaluzhny, not Zelenskyy, because he's the military.
Right. It created this alternative or this political figure who was at least as popular as Zelenskyy and could theoretically be perceived as a political threat to Zelenskyy.
Yeah. That wasn't Zaluzhny's ambition at all, but rather, that how the situation played out.
Sometimes you're good at your job.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so the coming, I mean, I'm just going to move things along a little bit. I'm enjoying this, but I do have a meeting to get to, unfortunately. So the Zaluzhny-Zelenskyy relationship begins to collapse, right?
Zaluzhny, like just yesterday, I mean, we are talking on February 19th. I think February 18th, there was an interview with Associated Press, if I'm not mistaken, by Zaluzhny, when he describes the problems already in the fall of 2022.
So what were the problems? What were the problems between the two men?
I think Zelenskyy just envied the popularity. That there was somebody as popular as him. I don't think there was any, at least we don't see any evidence of something wrong that Zaluzhny did politically. He, in a good tradition of post-Soviet military guys, he separates himself from the politics. So I'm doing my job. I'm not playing politics, his mere popularity was something that bugged Zelenskyy, and every time that's the moment when you try to be, present yourself as a neutral military guy, but when you, I don't know, publish a text in The Economist describing, how things in the war going and you describe it as a deadlock, that's what he did in 2023, that's something that the presidential administration didn't like because they want to preserve the image of, I don't know, we know what we are doing. It's not a deadlock. We have planned everything, although the counteroffensive in the South, 2023, didn't work out.
Right. And I mean, I think that's a sensitive moment because I think there were real hopes on that 2023 offensive that it never got, and we could sit here and armchair general that as to why that happened. But I mean, I think there was a lot of optimism about the possibilities of that offensive, and it just never worked.
Yeah, but now in the recent interviews, Zelenskyy accuses Zelenskyy of the failure. So he clearly now plays politics. So when you accuse, I mean, although he is now Ukrainian ambassador in the United Kingdom, so I mean, very weird interview by the ambassador in which he criticizes president. I mean, that's clear shots for presidential race, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And Zelenskyy benefits, and this is from an outside perspective who doesn't track this on a day-to-day or even a regular basis. But it shows his confidence that he knows that he can get away with saying it. He might get fired, but he knows that that isn't going to hurt him. That's only going to help him.
Yeah, that's something that Zelenskyy, I think, wrongly did, that he removed Zelenskyy from being chief of staff.
Right. When was that?
That was early 2024. I think January 2024.
What was the pretext for that?
I mean, that infamous text in The Economist that kind of played its role, and the failed counteroffensive in the South. So it wasn't clear what to do now. We are gathering troops for something new. What we are doing, what kind of new offensive operation we are planning to do? Are we only on the defense now? And Zelenskyy described the situation publicly, as we know it, as a deadlock. So he said that he doesn't know what to do, and I think one of his conclusions was, look for technology, something like that. If we kind of innovate with technology, maybe we can somehow change the situation in our favor. But yeah, I think that on the one hand, this rising popularity, on the other hand, this insubordination, you could say, because he basically went against the official narrative.
Sure. And he had his own popularity to look out for. Because, I mean, I think it's pretty easy, somebody has to be blamed for what happened in 2023. And again, we're not going to armchair general this. Neither of us are military people. I'm not a military person, so Yaro, maybe you have a secret history I'm unaware of, but I don't. So we're not the people to talk about it. But we do know politically that somebody has to wear that failure. And I guess it's not surprising that the two most popular people in the country were desperate for the other person to have to take the blame.
Yeah. And Zelenskyy removed Zelenskyy and appointed him as ambassador, I guess, to get away him from Ukraine, so he doesn't play politics.
Yeah, London's a really good spot for this guy.
Yeah, so he has some level of English, so maybe that, plus there is close cooperation with United Kingdom in terms of...
Sure. And he would know
military.
And he would know the security people in the United Kingdom very well. So I mean, it does make sense.
But that's double-edged sword. Then this guy gets international connections, and he can present himself as.
You know what? If I was Zelenskyy, I'd rather have him in London than in Kiev.
He's still quite often in Kiev, to be honest.
Sure, but anyway. Okay, so there has one of the key criticisms of Zelenskyy externally, particularly by people in Trump's orbit, has been that Zelenskyy has refused to hold elections. Is this something Ukrainians are clamoring for? Do they want elections right now? Just honestly, in your from your experience.
No, I don't think so. They want a change of people in the office, some kind of something like that. But if you ask about the elections, only when at least some kind of ceasefire. Because for people, they want to change, but not at the cost of war. Because if Ukraine decides somehow to hold elections, it's a moment of vulnerability in terms of war. Because then soldiers have to vote somehow. I mean, if it's done physically, so all of the places where people can vote are potential targets for Russian rockets and drones. So you have to guarantee that. I mean, many Ukrainians moved abroad, and you have to build infrastructure for that, create somehow to, those European countries where Poland and Germany, I think, first of all, but also others. So that's a complicated question that, I mean, I talk with few people. Some people say, yeah, it would be good to have it, but I cannot imagine how it can be done safely and correctly procedurally. I mean, people clearly started wanting more and more some kind of elections as more corruption scandals around Zelenskyy aggravated. So there is that. But people clearly don't want to do it at the expense of their security.
Fair enough. So people still trust Zelenskyy.
Yeah, there is some level of trust, but yeah, the idea is that we have elections when there is at least ceasefire.
Right.
So then we can, sort things out and somehow continue, but not the expense of our security. Let's put it that way.
Sure. I mean, I can imagine somebody who's like, you know what, I can't wait to turf Zelenskyy out first chance I get, but he's the only guy that can manage the war at this point.
I mean, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that, like, the people around him have experience at this point. He has experience at this point. He's a known quantity. You wouldn't have to staff all of the new offices all over again, bring people up to speed, try to form a new relationship with Parliament.
Yeah, that the thing that the main opposition parties, they don't call for elections. Their position is rather to form a government of national unity, because current government is Zelensky's government, so he has his people in the government. The opposition party saying, it's time of war, we should be united, especially after all this political crisis. That's actually a position of Petro Poroshenko, that invite us into power, and Zelensky doesn't want to do.
I can imagine why he doesn't want to do that. I also, I mean, my advice to Ukraine, not based on Ukrainian knowledge, but just based on knowledge of the world, of world politics. You'd never want to be a junior coalition partner, especially in a crisis, because you don't really get to drive the bus, but you'll get blamed for the bus.
Yeah, Zelensky doesn't want to do that, and
it's safe. It's a safe thing to demand when you know he's going to say no.
Yes.
Okay, so at some point, this war will end. I hope sooner rather than later for everybody involved. Your expectation is that Zelenskyy would be the primary opponent to Zelenskyy in the next presidential election?
That's, I think, because I think the post-war politics in Ukraine are formed by the results of the war.
Sure.
That's a problem.
Yeah,
because
sure.
That's quite an open-ended question, because the options on the table are, I would say, the three options. Some kind of miraculous Ukrainian victory, some kind of miraculous Russian victory or some bad peace that doesn't
that
satisfy.
everybody hates.
Yeah, as things look now. Bad peace, something that will hurt Zelensky. The level of how how deeply it will hurt him. That depends on what kind of peace or ceasefire. I'm actually, my guess is rather that if at least this year, I don't know how carry on, but some kind of ceasefire, and then Ukraine has elections. That maybe, but I don't think that Russia will be interested to that there is like kind of legitimate Ukrainian leader, because the whole thing is to kind of present their opponent as illegitimate, and because the Zelensky without elections being too long in his office. That's good political cards that you can play. Now it's not working in Ukraine, but maybe in the future when people get tired of it. But who knows?
Well,
But
and it works in it might work in international capitals, even if it doesn't work in
yeah,
Ukraine.
yeah. But that thing that war on the one hand, it kind of desolated the Ukrainian political space because there are not many channels how you can play politics.
Sure. Or TV
And
channels.
that yeah. Although there are many Telegram channels, Telegram is quite popular in Ukraine. That's actually something that happened in Ukraine. Politics gradually came after the failed counteroffensive of 2023. And even, people were looking to Zelenskyy before that failed. They started looking more and more towards him after that. And he's like an empty space in regard that people can attach whatever they want to him, because he didn't have clear policies that that can bring more new people to him or alienate some others. So
a little bit like Zelensky in 2019.
Yeah, that's in like ironic in a way. But that was also thinking that somebody who can beat Zelensky will be in the same position as Zelensky in 2019. So that's kind of it's empty place to which you can attach your hopes. But I would say more interesting question, like because presidential campaign comes basically to two people, I think, as it looks from now, Zelensky and Zelensky, and it depends how the war ends. But parliament is a tricky question because Ukrainian government, as I said, is formed by two forces, parliament and president. And parliament seems to be very fragmented, and will definitely have the coalition because all the forces, they are crumbling. And unless I'm quite skeptical if Zelenskyy can pull the same trick as Zelensky did with his party. I doubt it. People may, feel that, I vote for Zelenskyy as counterbalance to Zelensky, whom I don't like whatever bad peace we'll have or his performance during the war, whatever. But parliament, that's a place where I think people will vote with their convictions, their views. And that's interesting because that's actually something that will form Ukrainian government. And I don't know if we'll have simultaneous elections. If we have sequential elections, it also depends. I think that's a quite open question, like to what kind of elections we will have. I think presidentially it's more or less clear, but that's the only clarity that we have now. Other things, it's what kind of political forces, what division will be. Definitely see some of the military guys who are presenting themselves as politicians, and will go to the parliament on their popularity. What kind?
So
yeah,
last question. Klitschko.
Yes.
Yeah. I expect, I know that Klitschko and Zelensky have had their problems with each other. Where's
Yeah, actually, since 2019,
yeah,
that's from the
so
start.
yeah, so where is Klitschko? Is Klitschko still a major political force?
He, I mean, he was in 2014, but he made a choice for Kiev. He decided to be head of Kiev presence, although he has a political party, but it didn't perform that well in 2019 and 20. He's not present in the parliament. He present mostly, I think, in Kiev. So he remains a Kiev-based politician. He doesn't have now popularity in Ukraine. I don't see it him gaining that popularity because during his years in service as mayor of Kiev, he became a joke. He is not very good public speaker, and all of his, not very good wording became memes on the internet that won't help him to kind of reverse the trend that he's Kiev-based politician. For he is not, I would say that he's not a contender for national politics, either parliament or even talking about president. Interesting that the third major contender, I forgot to say something, is current head of presidential administration and one of the main negotiator with Russia, Budanov. His rating is the third one after Zaluzhny and Zelensky. So it is, I think, his place in all this because he has strong popularity. And I think that was one of the reasons why Zelensky picked him for being the head of the presidential administration. So he tried something that he suggested to Zaluzhny to join his team several times. But also there is this kind of weird story that J.D. Vance called Zaluzhny after the whole the first meeting with Trump during his second term that went pretty bad. And after that went bad, J.D. Vance tried to call Zaluzhny, and Zaluzhny refused to talk with J.D. Vance. Also interesting. But yeah, coming back to Budanov, that Budanov decided to join, unlike Zaluzhny, Zelensky's team. So there are also kind of this conspiracy theories that maybe Zelensky, if he sees that he'll have quite low rating in the presidential election, so he may step down and say like, oh, I won't run for the second term, but maybe, and there are two major candidates, I'd say. One is Fedorov, the guy responsible for all this digital transformation. And the second one could be Budanov. So that's but that's a bit of an exotic scenario in a way.
Sure. All right. Well, Dr. Kovalchuk, thank you very much for joining us. That was really great. And, I just can't express enough how stay as comfortable as you can. And my prayers with everybody around you and your friends and family.
Thank you for having me. I don't know. I find this conversation enjoyable. I hope your listeners will find it too.
They will, and we'll have you on again soon to talk about something else, maybe something happier.
My pleasure. Okay, Soviet history.
Yeah.